Hello, everyone, and welcome to the most amazing podcast on planet Earth. This is The Leader in You. My name is Polina, and I'm co-host with the amazing Dr. Lola Gershfeld, who is the founder of EMC Leaders and the inspiration behind this podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yay!
Yes.
Woo!
Hi, Palina. It's so nice to be here with you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening.
We're so excited to be here today because we have such a great topic. We just decided after the entire video about talking about Donald Trump and the whole Zelensky situation, we were like, we need more of this. And someone even told me they watched the video and they're like, oh my gosh, you're going to change the world. Like this, everybody needs to learn how to do this. Like just to see your perspective on that whole situation conversation was so enlightening to them. So we are back again for another great conversation. Dr. Lola, why don't you take it away and tell us what happened? You read an article.
I attended a
Oh, you attended
conference
a conference.
by FranklinCovey on leadership impact. They had a speaker, Kim Scott, who wrote the book Radical Candor. And she talked about the importance of leading teams through change, become more effective as a leader. I thought she brought up some points that she did really inspired me. Like, for example, she talked about how important it is for leaders to show that they really care about their team members and about their direct reports. And that care has to be felt by the other person. And she gives a great example of how when she started at Google, she felt really lonely. She felt alone. And her boss introduced her to a book club. And she's still part of that book club 10 years later. So she felt like the boss really cared about her. Or there was a moment in her life where her dad was really ill, and the boss called her and she said, look, why don't you fly back to Minnesota and spend time with your family and we'll take care of this business here. And so she really felt cared from her boss. And she said that it's so important for for leaders to learn how to show that care and build that human relationship. That is so, so important.
Those are all the good things you liked.
Yeah, I really like that because I think it brings the humanness into the business. And especially now that people work remotely, when we get on Zoom, we kind of lose that connection
Mhm.
when we work remotely because we don't see each other in the hallway. We don't see each other. It's not so easily for us to say, hey, let's get coffee or let's go out to lunch. So we can nurture that connection. And when we work from home and we get on Zoom, we usually right away get to business, right? We say, okay, what are the tasks? Let's go through what we need to do. And people start to feel like they're no longer humans. They're just like machines doing the work. And so they
Mm.
feel very disconnected. And she actually touched on that. She said, it's so important for us to slow down and take a few minutes and say, how are you guys doing? What has been different in your life this week? Or what has been touching for you this week? And so people can share and feel like you really care about their experience rather than just care about getting things done.
Yeah, I love that. I love Franklin Covey. Wasn't he the one that the company that like made all the planners?
Yes, that's right.
So that's really good. I think that's important and that makes sense. And as you were saying, I didn't actually even think about that, but it's true. You don't have like the surface conversations, but those surface conversations a little bit every single day, gives the signal to the person or your coworker that you care about each other because you're like, how are you doing? How's your day? What's going on? And during the lunch conversations, you could talk about personal stuff because you're stepping out of the business to have that experience with them. But then when you're working from home, you don't have that experience. So it makes sense that that would be really, yeah, it would be really beneficial and helpful.
I also liked what you said is when we get on Zoom, we are so sensitive to where people look and how they look and what are they doing while the other person is presenting because our brain is so attuned to our facial expression, to the tone of voice. So she said, do Zoom calls without the video. So you feel more comfortable. You don't have to worry that people are actually watching what you're doing. And that creates more safety, more relaxation, and people can actually focus on the topic rather than paying attention to what people are doing on Zoom.
It's a very different experience when you're on Zoom as opposed to sitting in a meeting with somebody in person because you're like really zoomed in on what they're doing in that little square box. And so we
Exactly.
don't have there, I think that we're just so in a meeting when you're in a meeting with someone in person, there's a lot of other stimulations that occur in the environment. So we're not like hyper focused on this one particular area
Yeah.
of concentration when we're working with them. So it makes sense for them to like, yeah, I like the camera because then you can see the person's facial expression. And also I feel, well, are they participating? Are they not participating? Are they focused or they're not focused? Like if they're turning their camera off, like how do I know?
Yeah,
Right? If
exactly.
they're focused or not focused, I think we live in a world where there's so many constant distractions, and so people have a lot less a capacity to stay focused on what they're doing at the moment or stay present in the conversation. So then it's like even more difficult if your camera's off. I turn my camera off and then I could be listening to like, oh, here's my phone, you know, as opposed to being on camera, like not wanting people to see if I'm like not really focusing, you know?
Right, right. And that's why she said you don't have to have all the meetings on Zoom or on the video. You can just have meetings on the phone.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that eliminates. And you're right. I mean, we do pay attention because our eyes are constantly assessing that attachment question. Are you there for me? Do you care about me? Do I matter to you? So the emotional part of the brain is like a radar, and our eyes pick up those messages from the other person to see. That's why when people are presenting or talking about some difficult topic or maybe a serious topic, and the other people start looking at other areas, they get triggered.
Mm.
They right away notice like, oh my gosh, you're not paying attention to me. So
Mm.
that could be very difficult for people to manage or talk about, even on Zoom.
Well, I also think that like people who have an amygdala that has been constantly triggered, like let's say they live in that state where their amygdala is like always heightened.
Yeah, when
I
there's
read
where it's not a security in the relationship, right?
Yeah, there's no security in any relationship because I've met a lot of people that way where they do not have a securely attached relationship. And actually in that book, The Biology of Belief, the doctor talks about how when the amygdala is triggered and there's no secure attachment, your mind is like you're about to do a race, okay? And the referee says ready, set, but he never says go. That was like the correlation. It's like you're if you don't have a secure attachment, and if you don't have that secure attachment or a securely attached relationship also amongst your coworkers or
Mhm.
in the work
Or
environment
with your boss, which
or
is,
with your boss,
yeah.
that's going to be your mental state. So you're already heightened, like your cortisol levels are already increased. I think this is also why people have such a hard time waking up in the morning to go to work because they don't feel that secure attachment. So they know they're going to get into that spot where their amygdala gets triggered and it's going to stay there and it's like ready, set, but you're never going to say go. And you're like at the race line, just holding on, like, okay, I'm waiting. That is like so exhausting. So when you say in like a Zoom call or a Zoom meeting where people are like looking around scanning, it's normal for us to be scanning so that people can get like that reassurance, like, are you there for me? I'm not alone. Do you have my back? Like those things, right? But then add that, like, which is our normal state of wanting to feel attached and connected to the heightened state of the amygdala of like the ready, set, but never saying go. And so now every little thing, it now becomes like even more vigilant with looking for those cues, and every little thing could become very,
Exactly.
very big trigger because there's so much higher sensitivity. There's so much more sensitivity with everything involved when you're in that state. How are you supposed to function in a meeting when you're just ready for a race?
Absolutely. And this is a very challenging for companies that have global employees, people in India or China or South America or Canada or wherever in Europe. And then they have to work together. And now they're always on that heightened state because they never had an opportunity to create that secure attachment relationships. And
Yeah.
that is very, very difficult for people.
So while you were listening to the conference, and those are the things that you liked, were there some things that were said that you didn't necessarily
Yes,
agree?
one of the things that she talked about is feedback, the importance of giving feedback. Called it challenging directly. She recalled an example of her giving her presentation, and after the presentation, her boss called her to the office and she said, "Look, you gave a great presentation and I really liked it. You can hire a speech coach so you can get better at presenting." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I don't need a speech coach. I'm so busy. Didn't you hear that we have an increased number of customers now?" And the boss says, "No, no, you need to have a speech coach." And like, "No, I don't need a speech coach." "Listen," she said, "every third word was an ah. You say too many ahs. It makes you feel stupid." And she said, when the boss says it makes you look stupid, she suddenly realized, like, oh my gosh, maybe I do need a speech coach. So
Mm,
she said that the boss used that sentence to really make a point, but she felt comfortable with her to use that language. It makes you look stupid if you use too many arms. She said that she wouldn't use that type of language with other people because she didn't really have such a close relationship. And I was thinking about that, and I thought to myself, what is the impact on the emotional state when you say something like that, even if you have a secure relationship? What
mm,
good does it do to say something like that? Because the injury that happens in that moment. I remember reading this research by Jill Hooley, who says that criticism from attachment figures, which a boss is a key attachment figure, is like a low grade punch to the brain.
hmm
It's very difficult for us. And even though Kim, her experience was like, oh, it was a wake up call, and I did get a speech coach, and I'm grateful. But still, to this date, I think she brings that example because it still hurts. Really, it still could be traumatizing for people. So, what I say is if you have to give feedback, give impact instead of feedback. Don't share feedback because feedback says you have to fix something. There's something wrong with you and you need to change. But impact is like when I hear you say too many ums, that makes me feel embarrassed. I start to
mm.
worry about how will that impact our customers? How will it come across to our president? I worry because then it makes me feel like I'm not effective as a leader, so I'm not coaching you. That is a different type of impact it has. And now people have a new emotional corrective experience where they start to think like, oh my gosh, I don't want you to feel this way. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, so this is great. So what you're saying is when she said to challenge directly, which means to right away tell someone when they're doing something wrong and then use a demeaning or critical comment, which is what she did.
Well, she didn't put it that way, but that's
But
how it came across, right? If you
right,
if you if you slow it down, if you
if we
translate
if
what
we
what
translate it into what was actually happening on an emotional level, we're not saying she did anything wrong.
right, exactly,
We're
exactly.
not criticizing her for how she's responding in that challenge directly.
Uh-huh.
We're just saying the way to express how it impacts you in an effective way is to express how it impacts you emotionally. But what
Exactly.
she did was she expressed how it impacted her in an ineffective way, which is to use criticism and shame,
Right. And
right?
shame, exactly.
Shame.
Exactly. To make a point, because every time the boss says, I think you need a speech coach, she would show a gesture like dismissive
Right.
to her boss.
Right. Right.
And the
Right.
boss saw that a couple of times and she said, "Oh, every time you use your hand, I feel like I need to now speak to you directly." So
Yeah.
now finally she heard the message. But what happens emotionally to people when they do that? It really puts them into that shame impact, impacts their confidence level. It creates a disconnection, I think.
And you're right, because criticism, along with sarcasm, and I've heard you say this before, those are like the low blow punches to the brain.
Exactly.
Criticism and sarcasm from attachment figures in your life. But I do notice if they have a secure attachment, like, because sometimes I see sarcasm and criticism as like a form of banter, and it happens
Right.
often in the workplace.
Mm.
It happens very often, right?
Yeah.
Like two colleagues will be going back and forth with sarcasm. When they have a secure attachment, I can see that it doesn't impact people as much
It
because
doesn't impact as much, but it slowly starts to erode the confidence level. Because if you do it too many times, the brain starts to feel there's something wrong with me. It starts to feel that disconnection. Because if you think about sarcasm, sarcasm is another way of pushing for connection.
hmm.
It's like I'm bothered by something.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tune. I don't know what I'm bothered by, but I'm gonna throw a stab at you, poke you with the
Mhm.
sarcasm because I'm bothered by something.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It makes sense. Like it over time erodes. And if we kind of relate this to the situation that you were sharing about the boss was probably triggered by the fact that she was dismissing
Her exactly by the
or
hand
dismissing
gesture, right?
her. The
Oh,
hand gesture. And now the boss is like, well, I'm gonna
challenge you
put
directly.
her in her place.
Exactly,
Almost,
exactly,
right?
exactly. And so she was also sharing managers or leaders or team members need to solicit feedback so they can get better. And again, I remember it was always dreadful place to be. You dreading to hear what the other person is going to say, the criticism to what you can improve. And the one thing that people forget is we are relational being. We don't change just in isolation. We
Mm.
respond because of our relationships. So it's not like we have to change, it's we have to understand what's happening in our relationship that is causing us to behave the way we behave. And how do we impact each other?
So this is good because also I think it's important to note that I feel when it comes to feedback, every single person gets impacted differently. This is why I don't like the word feedback. Feedback, I don't think is good or bad because everybody's going to have their different emotional experience. So let's say you're working with a boss that's sensitive. They say, "Well, I have feedback. Don't do this because it makes you look dumb," because they're getting triggered by the ums, right? But let's say, Susie next door offers her another better salary and she goes work for Susie. And now Susie doesn't have a problem with her ums, but Susie has a problem with her, I don't know, way she dresses, you know? And so Susie could be like, "Oh no, the feedback of you using your ums was fine. Actually, you don't look dumb at all." Like, so I think every single person's feedback is based on their own triggers. So the feedback actually, it's not feedback at all because you don't have to change it. It literally has nothing to even do with you. It has to
Exactly.
do with how the person is getting impacted by what you're doing. So had the boss say, "Oh, the ums make me feel embarrassed," or when you do speak and you're representing my company and it's making me feel embarrassed when you do speak in that way, that would have landed very differently because now you're actually training the person to respond to the way you want your company to be viewed, not putting them down because they're doing something wrong and now they're speaking with the their sensitivity that they have to deal with. Like, same thing with the Donald Trump and Zelensky conversation. Donald Trump got triggered because he felt blamed for the issues that Zelensky was expressing. Because
Right.
immediately he defended himself and he's like, well, it wasn't me because I wasn't in presidency at that time. Well, Donald Trump got triggered as opposed to able to regulate his own emotional experience, which the boss wasn't able to do either, and to share that, hey, like, yeah, I get it. I hear you. That's my fear is being blamed for
Exactly.
the issues and the I and the president I'm now did not do.
And the other thing that Kim was sharing, she said that when you give feedback, you have to be paying attention how people are receiving it so you can see the impact it has on them. And then you can modify the message to make sure to make sure that they know that you care about them. When people know that you care about them, that feedback is easy to receive. And I was thinking to myself, like, how would people even interpret the impact it has on you? If you're going to shut down or withdraw, they might interpret it one way. If they become defensive or aggressive and trying to prove you wrong, that might interpret a different way. So I think guessing how it impacts is a wrong thing to do.
How are you even like to put out a feedback like that? It's already difficult, right? To
Yeah,
use criticism and judgment towards someone to express how you're feeling is already scary for us. It's already difficult for us to hold on to that and express in that way because it actually heightens also our cortisol levels heightened and our tone of voice usually increases. We usually maybe speak quickly or it's difficult for us to give feedback. You've probably heard that before because people don't want to hurt people's feelings, right?
exactly,
So
exactly.
add that into now watch how they respond. Be attuned to their emotions. So now, like, you're already having a difficult time trying to express yourself without hurting someone's feeling, but actually it's coming across like that because you're actually hurting them while you're expressing yourself in a very ineffective way. And then she's like, oh, but make sure you watch yourself. It puts you in a lose-lose situation.
Yes,
It does.
it does.
Because she's
Absolutely.
like, well, tell them how it is, but then watch yourself because you want to make sure that's the thing. We don't know how we impact others because we are not the other people. So the other people don't know how to say, well, the way that you said it, it was hurtful, or the way that you criticize, or the use of criticism is really hurtful. People don't know how to say that. So that's you are all of a sudden like she's really setting you up to get into a negative cycle. And that
Absolutely.
triggers the other person. The other person's like, oh my God, yeah, this was so slay. But it was not slay at all
Yeah,
because it
exactly.
was really hurtful to them. And now they're actually using this like tool that she said, but it's or whatever the trauma that they're experiencing, the pain that's fueling them to continue. Over time, it gets very, very exhausting and not effective. And she's not thriving, that's for sure.
Yes, absolutely. I think this type of suggestions have been in business for so long. People are just packaging differently, but repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. I mean, no wonder why we have still on a high rise of workplace conflicts. We still see that managers don't know how to talk about difficult topics. We still see that employees don't know how to talk to managers about difficult topics. Everybody's afraid to say anything. I mean, think about it. They're teaching the same techniques over and over and over, and nothing is improving. Communication is not improving. Leadership is not improving. The culture is not improving. So we have to step back and say, what is missing? And
FranklinCovey needs to contact us. Come
I,
on.
I think so too. I think it's time for people to recognize emotions play a big role. And she's bringing one of the examples, a story that she said she was managing a team, and one of the people was very, very nice. People loved this guy, and he would bring candy to people and he would do lots of great things, but his work was terrible. And she
Yeah.
was afraid to tell him because everybody loved him. And
Hmm.
so finally, after 10 months of misery, she told him that he's going to be fired. And he's like, why didn't you tell me before?
Yeah.
People don't know how to share the impact. They don't even know their impact, what's happening for them. They're not even attuned to themselves in those moments. By slowing it down, by learning about your triggers and raw spots and emotions, you have actually start to have a language to guide you through that process and be very, very clear on what's happening for you.
When you were talking about the guy who was bringing like all these treats and like created this like, oh my God, he's so nice. We feel so sorry for him. We feel bad. We don't want to hurt his feelings. I was reading today an article about this man who was visiting a bank, like he was a customer at a bank. And he became very close with all the tellers and the security guards, and he would bring them like sweet treats all the time. Like once a week, he would show up and bring, and he did this for months and months and months until he robbed the bank. They gave him so much trust. Like everyone was like, oh my God, the nice man, the old man, whatever. He robbed $28 million worth of jewels
Oh
from
my
the
gosh.
they
Oh,
trusted him so much to let him have access to the vaults. He stole and he disappeared and they never found him. They never,
oh wow, my gosh.
Well, this is what happens is we feel bad for sharing, for wanting to share our opinion and our experience and our emotions, and we feel ashamed and we feel sad or we feel embarrassed, and so we don't do it. And then we lose out on actually giving a gift, right?
Yeah,
We're giving a gift to the person that can that can feel it and be able to respond in that way. Also, I think that it creates more value in the employee and the boss. When the boss shares the feelings, the employee all of a sudden thinks that they're important because they
absolutely.
care so much to share those feelings, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. Vulnerability pulls people together. And when people feel and know how to do it in a professional and safe way, it actually pulls the whole team together. I think we're on the right track of using the emotional connection and teaching people don't use feedback, use impact for better
I
communication.
agree.
Mhm.
All right, FranklinCovey, here's your chance. Donald Trump, we're gonna line them up, train them all.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. Thank you, Palina.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for everyone listening and watching to our podcast. It is a pleasure for us to be here. Remember, this is The Leader in You. And my name is Polina. And this is Dr. Lola. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's a joy to share these podcasts with you. Be sure to check out our previous podcasts and subscribe to join us at our next podcast of The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. Until then, be well and be focused on your relationships. We'll see you soon.